Okay, welcome everyone. It's great to have you all here on this Thursday afternoon, at least here in Melbourne, Australia. Before we begin, just a few instructions for you all. Please use the Q&A panel to post questions for us today. Feel free to use it as you think of your questions, and we'll direct those questions to the speakers at the end of the presentation. And please use the chat window as a space to share your thoughts, comments, and have discussions as we go with the community here. And we'll be keeping an eye out for any questions there as well as anyone with their hand up using the Zoom feature for help. If you need technical assistance at any time, please use that raise hand feature on Zoom. And Hayley, do you want to give us a wave, Hayley? Wonderful, Hayley will help you out. And you can also call Portable if you're stuck, and our number is available on our website. Also, I'd like to let you know that we're recording this session, so if for any reason you don't get to see the full webinar or you'd like to share it with some colleagues or friends, it's going to be available on our website to watch within the week. Just a couple of acknowledgements. So I'd like to start with acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on today. So at Portable, we're a team living and working on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. And we acknowledge that many of you may be zooming in from lands of other nations. We acknowledge their ownership of this land and the traditional custodians of the land on which the participants are joining from. And we also acknowledge the rich traditions of oral storytelling by First Peoples, which has allowed for the transfer of knowledge from one generation to the next for millennia. We pay respects to their elders past and present, and we extend that respect to any First Nations people joining us today. I'd also like to recognise that we're presenting amidst the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I'm sure you've all heard of by now, and the impact that it's having on people, especially students, teachers and their families. And we're going to be talking about education today, both here and at home and in communities around the world. I know I myself have a 6-year-old who's in grade prep, and he's just gone back to school this week, and it's a very emotional time. And yeah, we're not immune from feeling that here. This work would also not have been possible without the passionate participation of the educators, students and administrators we worked with both on the ground in PNG and in Melbourne. And this webinar falls at a particularly challenging time for educators that we want to acknowledge. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Joe. I'm the head of design here at Portable, and I'm going to be hosting and facilitating.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb and I'm a designer and developer at Portable, and I'll be presenting as well.
And I'm Theo, I'm the Managing Director of Green Sheet Consulting, and I'll be presenting as well. Thanks
team. And I should also mention the names of some other key people at Portable who led this wonderful project but are unable to join us today. We've got the wonderful Angie Raj, our senior producer, Adam Corcoran, our lead design strategist, who did a lot of the research and work on this project, and Sarah Kaur, our head of strategy, who also went in country for some of our research on this project and guided the team. A little bit about Portable before we begin. We're a research, design and development agency. We're based in Collingwood in Melbourne. Our mission is to identify areas of social need and policy failure and to make transformational change using design and technology. And we use design and technology for positive impact. And our work helps people in areas like education, mental health, justice in the public sector. And we work in spaces where it's critical to not only improve people's experiences, but in many cases to provide people in very vulnerable or challenging circumstances with the essential services they need. We're proud to work in these spaces, and we take this responsibility very seriously. And you'll hear a bit more about how we applied that to this particular project in Papua New Guinea. But now I'm going to hand over to Theo to talk a little bit about Green Sheet and how we partnered on this project.
Thanks, Joe. Green Sheet Consulting is a strategy and engagement firm with about a decade's worth of experience in culturally responsive engagement, strategy and design. And we've got an engagement methodology that puts people at the heart of our decision making. And over the time, we're focused on the importance of data to inform decision-making, particularly the voice of student, staff and industry stakeholders as part of our commitment to bridging the gap between educational theory and practice.
Thank you, Theo. So we're so delighted today to be sharing with you the story of a project that we loved working on, which brought many new learnings to our client and to our team, some of which we hope to share with you today. I'm sure you'll have some questions as we go along, so please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll have some question time at the end. And just as a bit of framing today, we're going to be sharing you our process and approach. We're also mindful of our ethical responsibility as researchers and designers, and so we'll seek to respect the confidentiality and details of some of the data that came directly from the educators, students and administrators and people we spoke with in country. So there may be some depth of data that we won't be able to share today, but our focus on the approach processes and tools that we use throughout this project will give you hopefully some insight as to how we work in this space and how we conducted our research and design and what we learned and produced along the way. I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey in education. So we began exploring the state of education in Australia as a potential research and development area in 2018. So Portable conducts some proactive research and design in certain areas. So we've looked into justice, into government, into death and aging, and we made a foray into education, which is ongoing work for us. And we're really prompted by the concern that as our world rapidly changes and transforms, that the question of how to design for education to equip the next generation for these changes and enhance their learning experience really guided our interest here. We also noted that there's a lot of, as technology becomes more widely available, accessible, affordable, that's digital transformations are prevalent in the education sector. And in talking to many teachers, principals, educators, and students throughout our work, we discovered that often this isn't implemented in the most thoughtful, considerate ways. And in some cases, it was deemed to be toxic transformation. And what we mean by that is that when transformation is short-sighted, when it's biased towards particular solutions, or when it's driven primarily by the institutional needs and not the needs of the people it's serving, it's toxic and often fails, or often it fails to meet the needs of the people it's actually there to serve. It's a massive undertaking, transforming education with new tools and processes, and we're really shaping how students learn to become the next caretakers of our communities and institutions, and the stakes are high, especially when we've already got so many, the context we're in is already challenging in and of itself. So, the question arises for us of how we take on that work responsibly. And that led to 6 principles, which I'll share with you towards the end of this, that help inspire us and keep us focused on the things we know we need to be constantly intentional about when it comes to designing for education. And you'll see some examples of how those were applied throughout this project. So just to set a bit of the scene for this project that we're going to be talking about today, our work took us abroad to Papua New Guinea, where members of our design strategy and development team at Portable worked alongside the staff and students of the International Education Agency of Papua New Guinea, or the IEA as we'll refer to them, as well as our project collaborators at Green Shoot Consulting and CompNow as well. The IEA employs more than 300 teachers and more than 700 ancillary and support staff. It's a not-for-profit business, and it's actually owned by the schools that it operates, and has been running schools in Papua New Guinea since 1976, so it's been around for 44 years. And in 2019, the IEA decided they wanted to get ahead of an exciting new development, which would create the connectivity and capability uplift dramatically in PNG and in the surrounding Pacific nations. This dramatic change of the Coral Sea cable presents also dramatic challenges for people and culture that hasn't had the pervasive presence of broadband connectivity for decades that maybe some more economically developed countries have. Countries where internet connectivity has been the norm for a while, and they've had the time to adapt their public services like education to what that actually means and how it works in practice. And whilst we discovered a strong desire from many people we spoke to in country to have greater technological and connectivity opportunities, we also discovered that the familiarity and capability with technology varied greatly from school to school and from person to person. So the IEA proactively put out a tender for a wide-ranging research project that would inform their approach on how to take advantage of this soon-to-arrive increase in speeds and connectivity, and what this might mean for their strategy about the adoption of educational technologies across their schools. And IEA engaged Portable to provide research and advice due to our history of work in education, our human-centered approach to research and design. Now, Portable, as mentioned, we put people at the center of the work we do, and it's very much the approach we took here with this project. In some ways, we were kind of an odd shape of partner for this project that's typically given to technology consultants, maybe without the same design or human-centered approach. And whilst we certainly have the tech expertise, our focus on the needs, motivations, the capabilities and values of people is what made us a unique partner for this project. But one that I hope you'll see brought a lot to the project that exists in a very unique and complex setting. Theo, do you want to share a bit about how Green Shoot was involved in this project?
Yeah, so we've had a really long-standing relationship with Portable and align strongly in terms of the way in which we seek to approach the work where it puts people first. We'd had lots of previous experience working in complex environments and remote environments with children as well. And it just seemed a really good fit given that we were looking at doing this work in country with challenging access to the people in which we needed to engage to generate the sorts of culturally responsive design outcomes that were critical to the success of this project.
Thanks, Theo. At Portable, we also take a solution agnostic approach in that we're not holding any particular solution or technologies in mind when we're seeking to understand the people and the environment. And that really frees us up and allows us to make recommendations that fit the shape of the space and the people and can integrate within the complexity that we uncover throughout.
So for the first stage of the project, we began our research like we always do by embedding ourselves in the subject matter with our own desktop research. On this project, our initial research contributed directly to our first deliverable for the IEA, which was a literature review providing a rationale for the use of educational technologies and the practical implications and possibilities of this for the IEA in Papua New Guinea. As much as we were itching to get to PNG as soon as possible, this was an excellent way to build on our existing knowledge and understanding. It also prepared us with some strong models for thinking about technology use in the classroom. So what we did with the literature review is kind of leverage the work of a lot of researchers, but in particular that of John Hattie, who was an educational researcher, spent many years assessing the impacts of different factors on students' learning. And we focused on Hattie's research into the kinds of things that help students make the greatest progress in their learning. We used this thinking as a launchpad to explore the ways that technology could enhance learning in IEA schools, because this was the ultimate goal of the review and the larger project in general for the IEA. And it was to understand how technology can support IEA schools to provide the best possible learning experience to its students. One of the key themes that arose from this research and which would continue throughout the project was that no specific technology would deliver the perfect solution. In fact, no technology will provide any solution on its own. Technology is not pedagogy. Teachers are still central to students and their learning outcomes. Their job is to help students develop knowledge and skills that lead to a deeper understanding and a greater capacity to evaluate. Technology is just a tool that can help. After the literature review, we put together a series of baseline surveys in collaboration with Theo and Green Shoot Consulting. And I hand you over to Theo to talk about the surveys in a bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. So we worked together with the Portable team and the community to co-design a number of surveys for 3 cohorts, students, teachers and administration across 9 schools. And it was really terrific that we got feedback from 558 students across 6 different year levels, 164 teachers representing more than half of the teacher cohort, and across 50 administrative staff. If we just go to the next slide. Thank you. So stakeholders were asked questions in relation to these 4 key domains. What is your general use of technology? What are the perceptions of the role of technology? How can we explore what can be improved? And how do we use technology to support learning excellence? And that gave us some really good place-based responses in relation to what the pain points, opportunities might be, capability needs, and just some insight into the way in which technology was being used at the various locations. It really highlighted to me the importance of a place-based response and enabled us to use this data to inform the next stage of work.
Thanks, Theo. And can you tell us a little bit about how you've represented the data here?
Yeah, so one of the things that was really important for us up front was to utilise a tool that we've previously designed, which enables us to map 5 different survey items to an area of inquiry, and really quickly visualise where a school, student or partner is performing well or otherwise. And for us, it talks to this notion of reciprocity and ensuring that each of the schools were able to have place-based insights from which they could make decisions into the future.
Lovely. So it was with great anticipation that we headed to Papua New Guinea for our first visit to conduct some in-person and on-the-ground research. That was August last year. Once we were in Port Moresby, we conducted a series of participant-led interviews, observational activities, workshops with teachers, students, administration staff, and other stakeholders at a number of different IEA locations, including the head office and 3 different schools. Our work in this visit took the form of exploratory research over confirmatory research. That is, we were looking to understand more about the context and the experiences of people without having formed prior assumptions that needed validating. In our design research practice, this style is about adapting a beginner's mindset, bringing thoughtful curiosity to our interactions with others, and acknowledging the people that we're interacting with as the experts in their own experiences and domains. In learning about these experiences, we seek to become the custodians of their insights and in order to place the needs of the people at the centre of any future recommendations and solutions. Where possible, on this visit, we tried to integrate mixed methods into our research. We did a number of one-on-one interviews with teachers, admin staff, ICT staff, and principals. And we found that in these interviews, it worked really well to immediately identify ourselves as independent researchers and the interviewee as the expert, and that we were not representatives of the IEA head office. We found that this made people more comfortable about opening up to us and sharing their thoughts and ideas in a really neutral one-on-one setting. We also found that we had many conversations in between the formal interviews, from talking with school bus drivers to talking with the administration staff while we waited for our next meeting. And these were also super valuable insights that we were able to gain throughout the entire immersive experience. We also did some workshops with students where they shared their current experience of what technology at school is like and how they imagine it might look like in the future. So one of these workshops was super impromptu. When we arrived at a Year 12 math class intending to quietly observe the class in the background, and the teacher thought it was a great opportunity to for us to get some thoughts directly from his students. So he popped off and had a chat with Adam about his ideas, and Sarah and I grabbed our sticky notes and Sharpies that we always have handy, and we ran a brainstorming session with the students where they shared what their current experiences with technology at the school like, how they felt about technology, and what they hoped for regarding technology use in their schools in the future. This was a really great session because we were able to uncover some really interesting complexity in the different levels of experiences and visions for the future from these students. Some students wished that they could just access the school computers during lunchtime, and others saw that the school could move towards a full digitization of attendance and in many other areas use technology. So 2 of the students actually very excitedly told us about a project that they were in the middle of, which was digitizing the manual sign-in and sign-out process of the school. And they were planning to give all the students cards and turn, this very manual logbook where students would sign in into this scanning system, which was really exciting for them.
Hey, Deb, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We often when we're doing research in Melbourne or wherever we might be, and we're able to come back to our studio and gather all our data together on a whiteboard and find the themes and synthesize it in that way. We have the time and space to do so, and we also have like a space that isn't the context that we're working in to sort of to come back to it and I guess look at it with fresh eyes more objectively. How did that go when you were in country in such an immersive environment and space? As researchers, how did you go about that analysis and synthesis of what you were learning each day?
Yeah, great question. So it was pretty challenging. We had a super packed itinerary for both of the visits that we were there, mainly starting at 8 a.m. and finishing around 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening. So we found that it worked really well for us to have a debrief and a synthesis session each evening over dinner and a drink back at our hotel. And this was a really nice way to round out the day. We could download what we'd learned from the day, share our different observations and conversations that we'd had, many of them slightly different. And then we could start connecting the dots about what we were learning, the different themes that were emerging, and the kinds of questions that we wanted to pursue the following day.
Yeah, something that was super insightful for me was the fact that some of the data that was being generated wasn't just within those structured interviews, but rather in those sort of water cooler conversations, those opportunities to build trust and connection with people really quickly as part of being able to navigate difficult conversations, particularly around technology. And I think that was a really important input into some of the design subsequent to that process.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Theo. Lots of the informal conversations and experiences that we had with different people were super important to building the trust and for us to be able to ask slightly more challenging questions to people, and for them to open up and share things that we may not have thought of otherwise. So after our visit, we headed back to Melbourne and we started putting together the next stage of the project. And this stage had a strong focus on setting a vision for technology use in schools and creating tools tailored for teachers. In this stage, we created 2 related documents. The first one provided a set of learning journeys for educators to assist them in their efforts to upskill in the use of educational technologies. For this tool, we drew inspiration from pre-existing teacher digital literacy, fluency, and pedagogy standards that are in use around the world. The idea behind these learning journeys, which were based on feedback and input from teachers and the professional development staff in Papua New Guinea, was to frame the various proficiencies as journeys. The implied idea behind them was that it's okay to begin from the place that you're currently at and then to grow your skills from there.
I think this is a great example, Deb, of how we really appreciated what this approach from IEA, which this was a contracted deliverable that they asked for, and it fit really well with our approach. In that we got to design tools and resources as opposed to just writing a report and giving some tech recommendations and platforms for them to implement. And the thinking that went into these and the consideration, wouldn't have been possible without having actually been on the ground, talking to people and understanding the nuance there and applying that to these tools. And as you mentioned, Deb, I think an important one for us was ensuring that whatever technology was implemented was adaptable and usable by people at various levels of capability, and that we weren't expecting people to be at a certain capacity of working with technology in order to get something out of it. And I think some of those foundational models and educational frameworks really helped give some guidance there as to some of those journeys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Joe. So the second document that we put together, tool for the IEA as part of this stage of the project, was a complementary document, and it outlined a vision for what digitally enhanced learning experiences might look like from the perspective of teachers, students, and their families. Sorry, there's some background noise. We'll just continue on. This is a tool for teachers and it's to provide them with guidance, inspiration, and some working educational models of how to enhance learning experiences using digital technologies in a way that is achievable for educators in the IEA's context in Papua New Guinea. So in this tool, we used a narrative approach, and we use this as a way to help teachers to engage and empathize with the content. The stories that we wrote were about moments in the lives of students, teachers, and parents experiencing technologies in ways that enhance learning. And during our in-country second visit, we were able to test some of these learning moments and stories and refine the contents and concepts of the tool directly with IEA teachers, students, and their professional development team.
Hey, how good is Zoom?
Yeah.
And doing webinars where you can't control the environment. It's fantastic.
I'm really sorry for that tree.
I'm really sorry.
Deb,
can you still hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. I just want to let you know we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. Hopefully the leaf blowing is nearly finished. So during our second visit in Papua New Guinea, this was in October of last year, we were able to plan some more activities at some more of the IEA's locations. This time we were able to not just be in Port Moresby, but visit a regional school in Alatau, which is on the southeastern tip of Papua New Guinea. And in this visit, we were able to test and validate some of the tools and deliverables that we had been creating, including direct uses of technologies in live classroom environments with the students. So we ran a pre-planning workshop with the teachers. And in this workshop, we used some of the learning moment examples as inspiration to build lesson plans for the following day with the teachers. We used a lesson iteration canvas that we'd also developed to help adapt and iterate on the lesson examples that we provided. And the teachers really engaged with this and really enjoyed kind of pulling apart the examples that we'd given and making them work in their context. In particular, they were quite concerned about the internet connection that they would have. So we were able to draw on tools that were available offline so that they could be quite confident in delivering that lesson in the classroom. So we really got fully immersed testing out these scenarios with the students and the teachers in their classrooms. So the following day, we ran 3 lessons with the teachers. The first one was a mystery Skype with the early learning students, Prep 1 and 2. And in this one, we made a call back to Melbourne. You can see in the photo down there, the young students. And we played a guessing game with our team back in Melbourne. The kids absolutely loved that. The second lesson was with an animation app, Toontastic, and the students brought the stories that they'd already been writing in their creative writing lessons and used the Toontastic app to bring their stories to life and animate them. And then the third lesson we did was conducting earthquake-proof experiments. Again, this was building on the curriculum that the teachers were already delivering to the students who had been learning about travel. And we talked about what kind of places in Papua New Guinea you should travel to and what were the natural disasters that were really common there. And it turns out earthquakes are very common. So here we use the Google Science app, which is available offline to test out. Students built some earthquake resistant structures and we tested out how well they would hold up against earthquakes.
Hey Deb, another question for you. We're talking about obviously the Coral Sea cable, like instigating a lot of this work and the increased connectivity that we're all expecting to be in the area. But you're also talking about some like offline tools there, and I'm curious what the thinking was there and why that was important for this project to be exploring those solutions as well.
Yeah, so the thinking behind that was that firstly, while the Coral Sea Cable project is predicted to bring much better internet access throughout Papua New Guinea, there's definitely still going to be areas where that internet access isn't available, and it's going to take a while for that to roll out. And we don't see that should be a barrier to teachers starting to bring technology into the classroom. And as well as that, we've talked to lots of teachers, not just in Papua New Guinea, but in Australia as well. And having a reliable tool to use in a lesson is something that's really important for them. If they take the time to plan a lesson, they want to be able to deliver it and rely on the tools that they're using. So things like not having to rely on internet access are really important for teachers. That's one of the things that we've learned anyway.
Thanks, Deb. So we concluded our work by producing a final report, which was a outline and a capture of all the key issues and the barriers we identified throughout our research. And we gave it the title, Technology to Support People in Pedagogy, to really put up front, you know, one of the key learnings for us throughout and the themes throughout, which was the people and the processes are as important, if not more important than the technology we implement. And that whilst, you know, a lot of people reading this report might be coming to it looking for, okay, what are the platforms we need to implement? What are the costs? What's the roadmap look like? We wanted to ensure that they couldn't miss the message that this work and the ongoing work that's required to manage the change of bringing in technology needs to have a continual focus on people. And as we all know, people are complex, right? It's not as simple as deciding, you know, when it comes to technology, that's often a very binary or at least a very understandable system that you can unpack and understand what the trade-offs are. When it comes to to people, it's complex, and we often, as designers, we look for solutions that not only that don't seek to trade off, but actually end solutions, in the sense that they look to solve things both for the systems and the businesses and the operations, but as well as the people. And that's why I think some of the methods we used, where we sat down with people and we got generative with them and got them to envision future states and learn from that, was really key to uncovering the learnings that we needed to form the recommendations that we made. So our report provided detail on a number of aspects that were identified to be central to digital transformation of the IEA, including its the learning experiences of the students and the staff and the communities. And the report provided comprehensive recommendations regarding the people, infrastructure, the platforms, policies, the strategies. It was quite, I'll run through a bit of a laundry list of what was included in there, but it was more than a shopping list of what's the hardware and software to buy. The report was written for the IEA board and management team. Many of the previous deliverables were intended for teachers and for community as well, to understand the change that was coming. This one specifically was for the board and management team. And it outlined the key risks and issues, provided a range of recommendations to fulfill the vision. Many opportunities for growth and increased leveraging of the technologies of the school have been highlighted throughout this report. In order to deliver this, I should mention as well, we partnered with CompNow to provide some best practice recommendations in educational technologies, and CompNow are an Australian-owned information technology service. They're established in Melbourne. We collaboratively wrote the final report. It contained a total of 78 recommendations, and they were, we referenced also the best practice in educational literature. I should mention a couple of things that we included in the report, which was drafting a position description for new roles that the organisation would need in order to make good on the promise of some of these changes and strategies. And we also supplied a number of scenario-based costings for the organisation to consider based on our technological recommendations. So we didn't just provide a one-size-fits-all solution, but we, I think one of the key learnings, things we learned was that it wasn't necessarily an equitable distribution of resources across schools in PNG, and even those within the IEA, and those many that were in more rural or rural areas lacked some of the resources to implement some of the technologies that some of the more developed schools could. And so we wanted to ensure that it was an equitable approach to how we were recommending the solutions, and that could be scaled dependent on the situation. We also visualized some of the work we did on ground. So this is an example of the future backwards exercise we ran with school principals, where we got them to envision future states, a best possible scenario, worst possible scenario, and then sort of work back from there. And we captured that so that people could see some of this work generated by people on the ground, as well as the theory of change that talked to a more comprehensive view of what a change process could look like for the IEA. And we also provided network architecture maps and technical diagrams as well to demonstrate how the ICT could work within the organisation. And so some things we learned, I guess one of the biggest key learnings, which is that even on larger reports that are centered on digital transformation of entire organizations, the insights that emerge from a human-centered approach, from that kind of research, they can still be the central guiding force. As we say, technology is not pedagogy, and we believe you must put people and process first before technological interventions if you are going to succeed in making those transformations effective in terms of the educational outcomes. So I mentioned at the beginning of this report several principles that we came up with in our initial exploration into education, and they definitely helped guide us and also were affirmed throughout the work on this project. And so I'll run through these now. There's 6 of them. So the first is that we are interested in growing and not disrupting. And I should say disruption sometimes is a necessary aspect of the work we do. If there is a system in place that is no longer serving the needs and is maybe quite entrenched, sometimes disruption is actually the right thing to do. But I think one thing we learned from talking to teachers and students in Australia was that often because third-party agencies or consultancies are coming in doing this work, that there's a disruption mindset by default, and maybe not an awareness of all the things that are right about what's going on in schools and in education today. And so it was important to us that we build upon the successes of the current system where we found them, and embrace teachers' passion and students' voice as part of that as well.
Joe, if I could add, one of the things that I think that aligns with in terms of both the portable and group approach is being solution agnostic and not going to the table with any preconceived ideas of what the outcome needs to be, but really anchoring in the feedback that we receive from people, from students, from staff, to identify and design an appropriate solution. And if it means that there is not a technological solution, then that's the solution, right? Making sure that we get as close as possible to fulfilling the aspirations and needs of the people that we work with.
Yeah, absolutely, Theo. Another one of our principles is giving life to great unborn ideas of educators. So as designers and again, people who are not entrenched in the system, we have more license to imagine and prototype new futures and to test those with less risk than it might be for, say, an educator, a teacher, a policymaker who feels they are more beholden to the current ways of doing things. And so with that comes a great enabling factor where we can talk to teachers about what some of their dreams and aspirations are and help them make that a reality in ways that maybe they don't have the means to. We believe that a school is not an island, and by that we mean that it's an integral part of its society and the community that surrounds it, and it's not a society in and of itself, but that it's actually part of a broader context. And I think a lot of what we learned from being in country highlighted that for us. We design with students, not just for students. We believe that students are the experts in their own education experience, and we're interested in understanding, exploring, and creating together to build new experiences for their learning. And a big one we've hit on in this presentation is that technology should enable learning and not be the focus of learning. I think one of the interesting insights for me anyway was that because we did some initial research and exploration in Australia of people's sort of feelings and responses to technology in education, often what we heard in Australia was that about the failures, about the things that were wrong, about the frustrations teachers had when it came to like things like digital whiteboards or connectivity or like planning a whole lesson and then having the technology fail and not having any backup. And we, in a sense, expected, well, at least I expected to hear similar things from P&G, a lot of trepidation and concern about technology coming into the classroom. But actually we found the opposite. And, many didn't have the access to technology and connectivity yet. So they were aspirational, thinking about what the possibilities would be. But there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of hope and optimism about what it could bring. And perhaps not the same lived experience with technology and understanding some of its failings and drawbacks. But often what we heard in Australia was that technology becomes the focus of the learning. It becomes the thing you do as opposed to just the tool that enables you to do the thing. And I guess that was an interesting context to bring into this project and yeah, hopefully share.
If I could add to that,
Yes, please.
The quantitative data, and I think it talks to Steph's question that has come through in relation to the teachers' motivations. 94% of all the teachers that provided an answer to the survey, so 90% of all the quality feedback that we got, indicated that the teachers thought digital technology would improve student learning outcomes, but really fundamentally here, only 40% of teachers thought that technology was important to being a good teacher. So there wasn't that reliance on technology providing the focus to good education. This was also complemented, or there was a tension around recognising that only another 40% thought that each of the schools currently had the technology required to do their teaching effectively. So it really does help us to understand the state of play there, where people are transitioning to wanting to learn how to and see the opportunity associated with technology, but the systems there not being ready to enable that to be scaffolded into the learning.
Yeah, absolutely, Theo. And finally, I should mention there's another one which we haven't captured here, but which came up in some of our preparation for this. But we need to protect the creativity of teachers and students, and by that we mean that often technology comes in, and as with any user experience, it has predefined boundaries as to what you can or can't do with it. And if we allow that, or if that's implemented in a way to create barriers, it really limits the flexibility and creativity of people in the classroom to be able to try new things. And so it's important for us that we foster an openness and preserve that environment where there's a willingness and freedom for teachers to take risks and take healthy risks with the way they bring creativity into the classroom. And so we wanted to ensure that that was part of the picture, and that we weren't just implementing tools that were going to kind of put the lessons in a box and put the education in a box. And one more I'll mention, which is that we are really culturally responsive in the way we approach design and design strategy, and we take great lengths to ensure that the cultural equity in the decision making that we're making is just and that is present, and that we're going into that new context and culture with respect. I know it was a lot of conversations had prior amongst our team about how to ensure we're approaching that in the most respectful, equitable way, fully acknowledging that the context that we come from is very different. The biases and assumptions and ideas we might have might be very different to people that we're seeking to understand. So that beginner's mindset, which that Deb talked about, was really important to us. And yeah, hopefully that came through in our interactions with people and in some of the deep insights we gained. I'm going to, does anyone else have, Deb or Theo, any other points you want to make before we open it up for a Q&A?
Oh, I think you've covered it all.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Obviously everyone that's joined us, but then also Deb, Theo and Joe for hosting this webinar with us. We do have a couple of questions. I'm just going to start in the chat box first. I always feel like I lose questions in the chat box really easily, so this is always the easiest way to go. We have one from Kathleen, and Deb, this might be good for you as you were in PNG. Did you see a significant difference between the students' knowledge and their attitudes to tech and and also then between the teachers and school admin?
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. Great question. Thank you, Kathleen. Interestingly, the attitudes and knowledge of students and teachers towards technology in Papua New Guinea, we found that they had quite similar levels of knowledge, the students and the teachers, and attitudes towards technology. So we saw quite a big difference at different schools that we visited. So at some of the wealthier schools in the capital city in Port Moresby, the teachers and the students had quite a lot of experience with technology. Lots of them all had their own devices. Most of the time they had access to internet, which was pretty good. And they saw technology as a useful day-to-day tool, much like we do in Australia. And visiting the school in Alatau, it was quite a different perception and understanding of technology. It was still a tool in people's lives, but it wasn't something that was quite as integrated. It wasn't really reliable because the internet was very unreliable, but it was something that teachers and students both were super excited about getting their hands on. They were going to be one of the first locations that would have access to the faster internet with the Coral Sea Cable project. And they were really looking forward to having that reliable internet and just being able to see what they could do with their devices.
It's interesting, Deb. I think that talks to that issue of a place-based response and access, to technology and the tools and the confidence in the technology being drivers to the extent to which people are able to engage with the technology and use it effectively to support educational outcomes. So, it's certainly a key learning if one was to be able to provide a consistent educational experience across each of the schools. How do we make sure that we are able to deliver a robust and accessible technological experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Theo. And I guess to that, even just acknowledging that different schools will have different experiences that they're able to deliver, and that it will take time, and even that those different experiences, that's okay that they're different, but thinking about how to support and structure, what kinds of supports and structures are needed to support the different environments and what's available.
Yeah, definitely. Then we move on to the Q&A box. We have one from Connor, which is asking, what were some of the existing moments and the processes that were unusual and surprisingly valuable to you, like things that you didn't want to disrupt?
I think it's also kind of connected to the other question from Vivian in there, which is some examples of the ways we could protect the creativity of teachers and students. I'm curious, Deb, if you experienced anything on ground of things you saw in the classroom that showed the sort of ingenuity or value of the approach teachers were taking that you wanted to ensure were protected throughout the change.
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. Actually, one of the things that was somewhat surprising and really awesome to see was that there was, in a number of classrooms, teachers and students were engaging with technology and also the kind of role of technology in their lives. And there was a whole bunch of things strung up around the classroom that were like rules for using technology and how to be safe using technology. So yeah, lots of classrooms were already thinking about things like social media and what are the impacts that can have on their lives. There were things like bullying mentioned, things like getting distracted, and rules about not using technology in class unless the teachers had given permission. So things like that were, really awesome to see, and definitely not something that we would want to disrupt, that the teachers are already well ahead planning for these things and making sure that students are thinking about technology and using it in a really safe way.
I think I recall from where that initial principle came from was from some conversations we had when we were conducting our research. It was timely because it was around the time that there was I believe a state government mandated ban on devices in the classroom, and that it was kind of a top-down approach to how classrooms should be run in regards to technology. And we spoke to many teachers who found that incredibly disempowering, and that they actually had their own methods and ways of managing that were worked within the context of their classroom and the people in it. And they found that ability to, that top-down approach that just put a blanket ban on them really hampered their ability to, young people have a lot of energy and focus towards their devices and connectivity online, and you want to be able to leverage that in some cases, right, and use it as an opportunity for learning. And teachers found that that they were no longer afforded that ability because of that top-down approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think we even mentioned that to a few of the teachers that we had conversations with, and they too thought that it was much better for them to, have things like contracts with their students about behavior and things like that with technology, rather than that being dictated by somebody else.
Very quite an interesting approach for a government to take. We've got another question here, also from Kathleen from previously, just asking if you guys could give any examples of pedagogy change that you would recommend. Obviously understanding that every context is different, so every change could also be different.
Lovely. Great question again. So one of the things that we were really trying to avoid in this project was to give teachers instruction about how they should be doing their teaching. So we were really careful to not recommend pedagogy, and instead we tried to find ways to help teachers to discover ways that they could use technology to support the pedagogy that they were already using. So things like assessments or planning, tools, technology as tools rather than as a means to teach the lessons.
Deb, I wonder if there's some relevance with the SAMR model here. So if people aren't familiar, SAMR is the SAMR model. I'm not sure who it was developed by, but Deb, can you recall, I'm putting you on the spot here, off the top of your head, what the 4 letters stand for? It's essentially about how technology can be used to augment learning and the different sort of levels of that, and how much of a change it has on or influence it has on the teaching itself. Doing some quick Googling there, Deb.
Yeah, I was just writing down the letters to jog my memory. Absolutely. So the SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, what is it?
Modification?
Modification, yep. And redefinition.
Redefinition, yeah.
That's right.
So with the idea being that, the more considered and thoughtful the technology integration is into the learning, it can actually, like we're talking about, we don't want to treat technology like it's an evil. Like I don't want that to come across in this way. And I think that can maybe be an unintended message of the way we're talking. Actually, there are tremendous opportunities, and that, when you get towards the end of that SAMR model of redefinition, you actually open up some amazing opportunities when it comes to how technology can be used to change the way learning happens and to engage students in new ways. But at the earlier levels of that SAMR model, it's substitution, which is basically, we used to have a physical whiteboard, now we've got a digital whiteboard. Or it's the classic thing of a teacher saying, turn to page 43 in your textbook, but now it's on an iPad, as opposed to, an actual textbook. So there's kind of a progression that happens throughout that model and how much it sort of changes the teaching that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, that's the kind of thinking that we tried to share with teachers, that from the kind of background research that we'd done. And one of the examples of the kind of high-end redefinition level of using technology in the classroom would be something more like if students create a video to create stories, and then they share that video on YouTube, and then through sharing the video on YouTube, they're then able to engage with maybe other schools which share their stories on YouTube, and there can be all sorts of learning, sharing and cross-cultural collaboration, international collaboration that just would not have been possible without technology.
There's a question in here from Amelia around, does our team have ongoing engagement with the schools, implementing the tools to see how they are used and may evolve? Unfortunately not, and this is actually something that we as designers and researchers often struggle with, is we spend a lot of time immersing ourselves and getting very involved, and as we spoke a bit about the sense of responsibility we feel, and we as much as possible try to design for a momentum, as we say, so what we deliver will have a life after we leave. But really, it's I think a big focus is ensuring that we're making the strong relationships and connections and empowering those with whom we're working to carry on the work after we go. Because unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to continually engage with the IEA. Hopefully, maybe at some point in the future we will. But we do as much as possible try to create the tools, resources, and the connections and relationships and engagement with the stakeholders in order to have them pick up what we've done and carry it forward.
We also have a couple more questions from Amelia as well, just sitting in the Q&A. I feel like they, sit quite nicely together. She's just asking do we consider some of the learnings from this project to be transferable to adult learning environments within Australia? Her second question had to do with, just technology being used in different approaches in different content, which I think kind of plays quite nicely into adult learning, as naturally the content can dramatically change.
That might be a nice one for you to talk to you, Theo, because I know you've done a lot of work with universities as well.
Oh, well, can you just repeat the?
Yeah, of course. So
Sorry.
would we consider some of the learnings of this IEA project to be transferable to adult learning environments within Australia?
I don't know that the learnings themselves can be transferable, but rather the approach can, and the way in which we seek to identify adult learning needs and design and curate a digital learning environment to be responsive to those needs, I think is what I took away from this experience.
Yeah, I would have echoed that. I don't have a lot of experience in adult education, but generally when we're working on design projects and we gain a bunch of insights in one area, it's a bit risky to assume that they can easily transfer to another context. And so rather what we do is seek to apply our expertise in the approaches and the processes and the tools to that new context. And use some of our learnings from previous projects as, I guess, hypotheses to test or assumptions that we are aware of. I might actually wrap it up there. Thank you so much. I just want to say big thanks to Deb and Hayley and Theo for joining us, and for all of you attendees for joining us today, and for all your great questions. If you're interested to learn more, you can seek out the case study for this project on our website at portable.com.au. And you can also find on there our Design for Education report, which expands on some of that, our principles for transformation, which Hayley has just posted a link to in the chat. Thank you, Hayley. And as always, if anyone needs to get in touch, please feel free to shoot us an email, and we can have a chat further about any of the content here or anything else that we do, or anything that you're working on. Any final words, Deborah or Theo or Hayley?
Thanks for having me today, and thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.